You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. You know, as I was driving into the office this morning, I was thinking about this podcast that I've been doing now for a handful of months, and was thinking about how much I really do enjoy it, and then sort of thinking about why I enjoy it so much. And I think the reason why I enjoy speaking and sharing information is because I believe it's important information, but I also feel that, in a sense, we're all called to speak about the facts and the truth. And I feel that today, more than ever, we are hushed, we are quieted, and people like me with a conservative voice, our voices are suppressed. And it just doesn't make sense to me to sit back and do nothing. So that's why I think it's wonderful that I have the opportunity to speak to over 2 million AMAC members that are in full support of what AMAC's mission is. That is, we stand for faith, family, and freedom, really at the highest level. And we are here to protect your individual rights and your liberties and to speak out on behalf of the 2 million AMAC members who say, enough with censorship. We don't want socialism. It would appear, based on the stories that make the news these days, that the younger generation among us are hell-bent on some sort of revolution, but not the kind that gave us the Constitution and a way of life that made America the envy of the world. It's almost like the Russian Revolution that enslaved hundreds of millions of people for nearly 7.5 decades, from 1917 to 1990. But it seems that the young people, or many of these young people among us, including those with so-called progressive agendas in Congress, that they're oblivious to the fact that we are willing to risk our freedoms to give socialism a try. And I think we need to pause and consider what the trade-off is. We hear so much about unity. We're hearing so much about cancel culture. We're feeling government encroach more so ever in our lives. And there's a blind eye that's being turned, in my opinion, to the tragedy across America, like the homelessness. And, I just saw in the news earlier today that there are folks that are just lining the streets in Philadelphia, and they're taking needles and heroin and whatever drugs that they're addicted to. And that's really sad. We see that there's so much black on black crime. We're not seeing what's happening in those inner cities. How are we helping those people? And instead, we're talking about political correctness, things we can say and can't say, and not really getting to the heart of the problems in America. As Winston Churchill put it, he said, "A nation that forgets its past has no future." Well, how could that be? Perhaps a recent opinion article in the Wall Street Journal signed by 6 former U.S. Secretaries of Education holds the answer. Following years of polarization and the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, the world's oldest constitutional democracy is in grave danger. We stand at a crossroads, called to protect this democracy and to work towards unity. The progressive movement is specifically targeting America's youth. And they do that by sugarcoating the idea of socialism. Take the article with the headline, "What is Democratic Socialism?" Sounds like an oxymoron. And why is it growing more popular in the U.S.? That's a question that I'll be speaking with Bobby Charles today, who will be joining us. Robert Charles, many of you have heard Bobby. He was on with us last week. And Bobby Charles is AMAC's spokesman. He's got an amazing background, and you'll learn more about Bobby. But I really do enjoy speaking with him because I kind of want to ask him, why is it that socialism is growing more and more popular in the United States? And listen to this. In Teen Vogue, which is a magazine that bills itself as the young person's guide to saving the world, it was written by Samuel Arnold, an associate professor of political theory at Texas Christian University. and it focuses on what he seems to be promoting among the teenage audience, the socialist ideal. For example, he cites a list of reasons why socialism is much more democratic than capitalism. And he gives the young people reasons such as socialism would harness our collective wealth to meet everyone's basic needs, or so its advocates maintain that truth. No longer would some people be fantastically rich while others are reduced to begging in the street. So essentially, what he's saying is socialism is the answer. This is what the youth is being sort of brainwashed to believe. And we know better. But we need to remember history. We need to look at other nations that have tried socialism and see where they're at today. And I've got some really good, interesting facts to share with you. Bobby Charles as well. He's got some really good insights. So, coming up with us in just a few moments on today's segment is the Reb and Rob show on truth and history. And I look forward to having Bobby right up with us. Don't go anywhere. Be right back. Welcome back, folks. I'm Rebecca Weber, and here with me today is Bobby Charles. A lot of you remember Bobby. He's been with me previously, and we'll be coming to you each and every week with a fun segment called the Reb and Rob Show on Truth and History. So we're very, very excited to share with you a lot of stuff that I spoke about earlier just before Bobby joined us. Let me give a quick background to remind you who Bobby is. Bobby worked in national security and criminal justice for more than 3 decades. He was with the Reagan and Bush 41 White Houses on the U.S. Court of Appeals. So Bobby's got a tremendous background. Bobby has also was chief counsel to the U.S. House National Security, International Affairs, and Criminal Justice Subcommittee. Every time I say that, Bobby, I feel like it's a mouthful, but I always say that just in plain and simple English, you're just a very, very smart man. So
You can just say,
very happy to have you here today again.
it's a pleasure to be with you, and you're always so kind. So happy to talk.
Thanks, Bobby. So just earlier, I was speaking to our listeners about the sort of strange world that I feel we're living in. Every time I turn on the news, I'm seeing things that we didn't see 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it's not really, it almost seems like we're desensitized to the truth of the craziness that's out there. People on the streets of Philadelphia, for example, that are hooked on all kinds of drugs, the lawlessness across the country. And what's so sad is there's so much finger pointing, right? And people are calling it racism. People are using the word wokeism. Something I want to talk about is socialism, because that's another thing that we're seeing. The young people, today's young people, are really being brainwashed, in my opinion, to believe that the solution to solve the problems in America, specifically the inequality that they point out, is let's bring socialism in. And I know that, boy, you've got some personal experience. You've seen things firsthand. So I thought, let me ask you, why do you think that young people are embracing this idea of socialism, and where is it coming from?
Yeah, so those are two very good questions, and I'll start out by saying that there's an old adage. I think it was Francis Bacon said, "Knowledge is power," and of course, ignorance is power in the hands of someone else. And so, if we don't educate our next generation and frankly ourselves about the seriousness of what's being attempted here, we're going to pay a terrible price. So the two questions: what's going on and who's causing it? I think the who's causing it part is there has always been an attempt. If you can go back to the 30s, you can go back to the 50s, you can even go back to the late 1800s. There has been an attempt. Now it's supported by social media and others to try to undermine the principles of this country. And I think of the principles essentially as being embodied in the first 3 articles of the Constitution and the first 10 amendments. Of course, all the other amendments are important too, but the first 10 give you a real sense of what it is that we fight for when we have fought all over the world for freedom, for our own freedom and for freedom of others. So what is socialism? Socialism, if you were to boil it down, is the antithesis of individual responsibility. Individual responsibility is when you take it on yourself when you get up in the morning to make your bed, you take it on yourself to get your own meal, and you start at work. And you're working now, and I work every day, and people work. And you work is the way in which you make real the aspirations that you have in life. And they may be very short term. I want to get this done by time to pick up the kids, or it may be that I've got this bigger dream that I'm constantly pushing toward. This country is built on, it is the fabric of this country is made by all those dreams that were individually thought of, individually pursued by hard work, individual responsibility taken when they failed, and gotten themselves back up again and worked again. And by the way, worked to help their neighbor. But socialism, to start with, is the antithesis, the opposite of both freedom and the idea of individual responsibility, taking advantage of the freedoms this country was founded on. The second thing I'll say is that it's—
Can I
Yeah.
just add to that before I forget, because and then I need to hear the second part. What you just outlined is the way that I was raised. I'm very fortunate. I had a grandfather and a grandmother that were very involved in my life, and it was really that. It was get up and make your bed. And if you get in trouble at school, what did you do wrong? There was something about being accountable, and something about learning self-control, learning how to trust your own instincts and make decisions, and then to sort of deal with the consequences of those decisions. I feel that the most frightening and heartbreaking part of socialism is when you take away that, you take away someone's self-love, you take away someone's inner pride of saying, hey, I did that. How are we to raise strong-minded, level-headed, a future generation of Americans when they're raised to be victims, in a sense, right? Blaming everyone else for the problem and looking for everyone else to solve their problem. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And you and I doing this and talking about this is so good. It's even better when the people who are listening share it, because it's why we're doing this. We're doing this so that we can hopefully speak to people who are even younger people. I think a lot of our AMAC members, they get it, they understand it. But, this is something we've got to bring to our children, to our grandchildren, to our 15, 16-year-olds, and have that conversation. So that first point, I just wanted to emphasize it and put sort of an exclamation point at the end of what you said, because it is those very simple principles are what I think build character and build future. Right. And truth.
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely right. A couple of very quick reactions. So, what you're saying is in perfect sync with what Ronald Reagan believed. I think I've got a picture of him up there somewhere. The reality is that freedom, as he said, freedom isn't passed down through the bloodstream. It has to be taught. And where is it best taught? Obviously, teachers need to take responsibility, not become beholden to unions. They need to know what they know and really, really teach what they know about the values of this country, because they didn't get there without pursuing their dreams. But it's also about the family. It's really about the family teaching that these principles matter. And your father, of course, founding AMAC, was a tremendous force for good in both in his life and now. And I think that we have to remember that America is built on lots of people understanding these principles. So just to come back to that second point, the reality is that socialism is really all about using fear to control people and to bring them down to the least common denominator in the name of equality. So the word equality is used all over the world. It's really a tool of class warfare. The idea is I will suppress the freedom of those people who do well. I will suppress the initiative of the people in the name of those people who haven't done well. Now, don't get me wrong. Ronald Reagan would have been the first person, and any good conservative understands you need a safety net to protect those who maybe from a disability, from a piece of misfortune, from a temporary
Sure.
time of unemployment. But that doesn't mean that you literally sidestep the whole principle of freedom. No, freedom is freedom and individual responsibility, the antithesis of socialism. But socialism is premised on fear. And I'll give you a couple of concrete examples, Rebecca. I spent just by a strange kind of twist of life, I ended up spending a little bit of time in the Soviet Union and in Poland, a couple of months in Poland under martial law during a period of, one time in martial law, one time not, but under communism, and have spent time in a lot of communist countries, Laos, formerly East Germany, et cetera. There's some very frightening things that people don't realize that happen in those countries that are beginning to look like what is being pushed here. So the idea that you're not allowed to freely speak your mind. Well, listen, our Supreme Court cases back to the beginning and our founders all believed you have the right to speak your mind and to offend your fellow citizen. And why? Because by offending your fellow citizen, you are in pursuit of, you might offend them, but if you're in pursuit of truth and persuasion, then gradually the entire country goes the right direction because the bad ideas get knocked out and the good ideas come to the top. Same thing with respect to freedom of religion. Look at what they do in China. Look at what they've done in these communist countries. They literally penalize people for having faith. So all of those principles are terribly important. And I will never forget, just a little story. I will never forget, Rebecca, being in Poland and waiting on train platforms, going from point to point. And you'd have a couple of hundred people. None of them are making eye contact. None of them are obviously content. They're agitated. There's a sense of trepidation just in going from point to point. And the biggest, most profound thing, it's like the elephant in the room for me at that time, was to see all these children. Children are always spontaneous. In a society that's free, children learn to express themselves, and they love to do that because they're kids.
Yes.
In this country, in that country, in the countries East Germany, in Poland, in Czechoslovakia under Soviet rule, the children never laughed and never talked. And so you have to say to yourself, what kind of a society are we building if the concentration of power in the name of equality and trying to create class warfare and bring the upper tier of freedom-loving, hardworking people down on behalf of those that, encouraging dependence on the government? What are we doing when we create fear in our population? That is not the way America was founded, and it's not the way that we're going to prosper in the future.
It sure isn't. And that's good. I love that you're sharing that bit of history because it really, we can learn so much from it. Now, I want to ask what you think of this. There was an article that was posted in The Hill. I don't know if you've seen it, but we've got two senators, Democrats, one from Hawaii, the other from Illinois, and they say that they will vote against President Biden's nominees over the lack of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander representation. Okay, and they're furious that there isn't greater diversity in his cabinet. So I find this odd. Okay, I just find it odd, and so this goes to this class warfare and this notion that we're no longer judged by our actions and character, but it's all about the color of our skin, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
You're so right, Rebecca. What you just did there, that statement, I'm sure, is the percolating up of Martin Luther King's statement that we should be judged by our character and not the color of our skin. It's a bigger, go back. This is a timeless proposition that's being used by I say socialists, it's really leftists. It's people who want to concentrate power and then control the rest of the country. I think it was Caesar who initiated the idea that you divide and conquer. Right. So you divide a society. China knows this very well. They're a war fighting culture historically. Russia knows this. Information warfare is going all the time in this country. The principle is you divide the American electorate because it's so free and open. You use social media. You use all these other tools to cause them to fight with each other. There's an old Grimm's fairy tale about stumbling upon giants and how do you get them to take themselves down. down, you create a feud among them, right? So what are we doing? We're allowing ourselves to be manipulated as a population who actually are all together one society who
Right.
believes, at least in principle, we believe in freedom.
In
And
freedom.
I've always thought, Rebecca, that every American, left and right, minus those that hate America, but every American has more in common with every other American than anyone in the world. I've been in 50 countries, and I'm going to tell
That's a
you,
good, we have to remember that. I like that.
it's
We got to
really true.
remember what we have in common. And you've seen that that isn't the case in other countries.
That's absolutely true. I mean, we are unique in that not only is our society the founding of our society, where legitimacy comes from the people, sovereignty belongs in the people. It doesn't belong. The government works for us. We don't work. We don't work for them, and we are not to run in fear of them. The interesting part is that model has now replicated itself in hundreds of countries around the world. Why? Because that constitution, that principle, that freedom in balance with equality for those who really need that safety net, but that
Right.
freedom is the centering piece. It's what holds us together. So I want my neighbor to do well, and I want them to want all of their neighbors to do well. The way that communism works is if your neighbor has a cow, you say, "Gosh, I don't have a cow. Let's go kill that cow." The way that it works in America is, hey, if my neighbor worked hard and earned enough to get a cow, let me go work hard enough to get a cow. And everybody can have that. I mean, look at the history of our country. We came from nothing, and we are the most powerful economy and the most powerful military and the most open society and the most opportunity-driven society that mankind has ever known. We should value that.
We should value that.
We should
We
cherish
really
that.
should. And Bobby, I just want to share with folks listening. This is the kind of stuff that I have to deal with. When I'm put my business hat on and making day-to-day business decisions. I received just this morning in my inbox that a major corporation, a major insurance corporation, in this case Cigna, now I've got to do my research here, but brainwashes employees with communist propaganda. Now, I'm going to do some deep research in that because I want to understand and know that the people that that we work with are good people and doing the right thing. But this is when I say to you that advertisers won't come to us or have decided to pull ads, such as the CDC. The CDC.
Yeah.
The Center for Disease Control, who said, we have a small budget of X. We want to run with you folks in 2020. They were right there with us. We were pushing out the truth to our senior members, and they appreciated that. And we get a notification, we're not working with you folks anymore. I'm seeing it's strange, Bobby.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
Let me comment on that. So the first two things pop immediately to my mind when you use that example. The first is that people bounce. I mean, even people in positions of authority, both in politics and in business, they use words. And by the way, they criticize each other with words that they don't know the meaning of. So, I don't tend to think that a major corporation in the United States is communist. I think they're probably free marketeers. I think they're probably capitalist. I think they probably believe
Sure.
the balance between, that you add value to products and then you pass them on. You add value to services. And, John Locke, go all the way back to the second treatise, John Locke. And what did John Locke say? He said the essence of it is a secure environment where you allow people to mix their labor with the land, which means mixing their labor with anything, so that they can get further ahead and can create a little castle. He didn't use the word castle, but a little place where you can call your own. That's the dream, okay? And that's what businesses allow people by employing them to do. But let me add something else here. It isn't just we are going through a period right now, and you're picking it up at AMAC, and you're talking about it, and it is so important. We're going through a period of the chilling of corporate speech, and we're also going through a period of chilling of personal speech. So people are now second guessing themselves on stuff that the Supreme Court has long said you should never second guess yourself. I mean,
Right.
if your product is named, pick a name, just because you can always that from a marketing perspective, you're going to get more people if you change the product name. But to do it out of fear, which is what's happening now, dozens and dozens of major companies are changing product names out of fear that they will be accused of being racist or ethnically insensitive or insensitive to the, I think we now have 30 some sexualities. We're going to be insensitive to all of this. So we're going to change the product name. Look, let's get back to basics. Basics are, I know it sounds so simplistic, but there's a real truth to it. And it comes out of people who had a lot of faith. I mean, not only faith in America and faith in their fellow citizens, but faith in God. Okay, these founders came up with the Bill of Rights because they took 60. I mean, Madison, go back and look at Madison's notes. They took 60 possible amendments and they narrowed them to 10. And they said, look, if we can get a society built around these 10 and this constitutional process for selecting their own leaders, as long as they never end up buying votes, as long as they never end up corrupting the electoral system, these principles will last forever and ever, and they will guide that country to growth. Well, one can only say that Jefferson and Madison and Washington and Adams and Monroe, they were right. They were absolutely right. And we need to remember how right they were. They took so many risks to give us the beauty that we have here today. What is our job? Our job, it seems to me, Rebecca, like your father would always say, is to be equal to our time, to go out there and preserve this so that we hand it on, do no harm. You know, it's like when you go camping, you're supposed to leave it better than when you went out the first.
That's right. That's right. You want to be invited back again. Exactly. I want to leave. We're going to be wrapping up here in just a few moments, and I'm going to have you leave the final word with our listeners, because I love that you share so much about history, but also that your messages are very uplifting. And so I know that you're gonna leave our folks with something uplifting. I have a couple of really funny memes I want to read though to you that I just found really cute and kind of funny. But this one, very true. Think of it this way: mice die in mouse traps because they do not understand why the cheese is free. The same thing happens with socialism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple, right?
Yep.
Here's another. Yeah, here's another. If socialism is so good and capitalism is so bad, then why isn't the caravan heading to Venezuela?
That's right.
Simple question. I mean, think about it. I just feel that there's a left that is so extreme that wants to change America, change the heartbeat of America, change the soul of America. You and I know that we live in the greatest nation ever, right? And we know that because of our freedoms. You said it earlier. We are going to continue to bring the truth to all of our AMAC members. We're going to fight for you in Washington. We do that each and every single day. Your bi-monthly magazine, hopefully people are enjoying that. We're going to continue to, even if we know our magazine might get pulled from the mailbox, or maybe it won't make it to your mailbox. If you don't get it, give us a call. We'll make sure, we'll put it in a cover envelope, because that's how crazy the world has gotten. We are being censored, but we're going to continue to speak up. That's our right, and it's our duty. So I'll leave it with you, Bobby, if you want to just share some parting thoughts, some parting words.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard to stay optimistic in a time when you open the door and it's a blizzard every day, and you keep thinking, is spring coming? And it is coming, and it always does come, because you can't suppress these freedoms. They're like a bubble under the water. They will come up. Now, were they going to come up in the next year, or are they going to come up in 5 years? That depends on how hard we push. Maybe I'll end with, one of the great blessings of my life was, and it really is a lucky thing. I grew up in a small town in Maine, as you know, and a lot of people helped me along the way. And I ended up obviously working for Reagan and working for George Herbert Walker Bush, and then working for Colin Powell. And I felt great privilege in those opportunities, and worked very hard, got up early, went to bed late, because those were great opportunities. But as we talk on here, I remember and know that one of my faults is I talk too much. And it's interesting, because Ronald Reagan, as a young man, spoke at the Republican National Convention in '64, I think it was. And he apparently, the chaplain at that point, just a funny story, the chaplain said to him, Ron, something along the lines of, Ron, I got transferred around when I was a young chaplain, and I was reminded that that it's important not to go on too long and to keep humor in what you're doing, which incidentally is also a way of keeping people optimistic.
Right.
And so this chaplain said to him, "I want to tell you a story. I was in a little town that hadn't had a pastor for a long time. I came into the town, and first Sunday, because they hadn't had one, there was only one fellow down in the pews. And so he said, would you mind? I wrote a sermon. Would you mind if I delivered it today?" And the fellow down there said, "Look, I'm just a little old cowpoke from Oklahoma, but if you brought a sermon, I'm happy to hear it." He said, if I went out to the fields and I found there was just one cow out there, I'd still one heifer, I'd still feed her. So the pastor felt pretty good, went back up, delivered his sermon. 3 hours later, he came back down out of the pulpit. He said to the fellow, "Look, you've been really good here. You stuck me out for this sermon. What do you think?" He said, "Well, as I told you, I'm just a little old cowpoke here from Oklahoma. But if I took my wagon out there to feed that heifer, and I found I had a whole wagon load full of feed, and I went out and found the heifer, and I found there was just one heifer out there, I sure as hell wouldn't have fed her the whole wagon." And the point is, you can always, as I talk on, you can always lose people. And I just think keeping a sense of humor is important. Ronald Reagan always did that. He had down times. We all have down times.
Sure.
Remember the hope, because the hope is how you get to the high points again.
Thank you so much, Bobby. This is wonderful. I really enjoy this, and I'm excited to have you back again with us next week. We'll be doing this each and every week, but I'm really trying to encourage people who listen. Please share this podcast with friends and family. Let your friends and family members know that there is an organization that's fighting for you. It is AMAC. We're the fastest growing conservative organization in America, and we are the true David versus Goliath story. We are the David. There is a Goliath out there with over 30 million members. They have incredible clout, and they have a big muscle. We need more members in order to get the job done that we know needs to get done. I want to thank our members for their loyalty, for renewing, for doing so much work around HR 1 and S1. Over 100,000 emails were sent to elected representatives, senators, governors, secretaries of state. So we thank our members for doing that heavy lifting, because your voice is being heard. Thank you all so much for joining us on today's podcast, Better for America. And we look forward to having you back with us again next time. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.